Okay, guys, welcome to this online multimedia presentation for the characters in As I Lay Dying. So a lot of the chapters are told from different perspective, all pretty much within the Bungeon family. There are some other characters that get some spotlight, but most of the chapters are focused on the Bungeon children and the Bungeons themselves. So we're going to go over those characters in a little bit more detail because we have to see their journeys in order to get the underlying message of the novel. So after this presentation, you guys are going to be able to talk about the characters and how their journeys relate to the overall plot and why it's important to understand each character. And then after this presentation, you guys are going to jump on that web quest that I created earlier, review it, go ahead and answer those questions that are on there for your assigned character, and then the next day in class, you will be getting together to put together your answers and to present for the rest of the class. So for this novel, we see that the main idea is this family that is on the more poorer side. It's a Southern Gothic novel, so it's not going to be all roses. It's going to be some twisted things in there. It's going to be a lot more of realistic lifestyle for people rather than fairy tales. And so Faulkner was actually really good at that, at bringing the real life problems, especially in the South, into his novels. And so we see the Bungeon family who are struggling with getting their lives together and putting food on the table. But we have the mother, Addie Bungeon. She is actually the reason that the novel is taking place. She is on her deathbed when the novel begins, as we see, and it's really important to know that she is the reason these kids are all traveling to Jefferson, because her final request was for her body to be buried there, because that's where she was from, and that was where she felt true happiness. And we'll see in her chapter 40, which is probably arguably one of the most important chapters in the entire novel, we see why she feels that way. We see that she struggles with having to be happy with the role that she was given, which was to be a mother and to be a wife and to be living in a poor family, when she was more of a free spirit and she wanted to do things for herself. But because of that time period, she was stuck with these expectations. And so she kind of, in a way, regrets it and then puts blame on Ance a little bit for it. And so their marriage wasn't as happy as it could have been. But she is the reason for the whole novel. And so it's very important to get to know her and her relationships with the children, which there are some confusions. Some people think that Addie had a close relationship with Darl, but it was actually with Jewel, and there's a reason for that, which I will get to when we get to Jewel's petal. So next up, we have Ance Bungeon, who is the father to 4 of Addie's children. And I say 4 because Addie had an affair, which we find out in chapter 40. And so one of the children is not Ance's. He is one of the only people that is very adamant in getting her body to Jefferson, and we think that is for a selfless reason, but actually his motives are more selfish. When he gets to Jefferson and he finally buries Addie, we see the last few lines in the novel, he has a new wife and a set of teeth that he always wanted but couldn't get because he had to support the family. But now that Addie was gone and the children were growing up, he spent his money on some new teeth and a new wife. And I believe one of the last lines of the novel says, "Meet Mrs. Bungeon." So it seems as if Addie was replaceable to him. You just put her in the grave and all of a sudden he already has a new wife. Now, was this because of the expectations, or is this because he really didn't care for Addie? And we see in their chapter 40, from Addie's perspective, she was not happy in the marriage, and so it is easy to believe that maybe Ance was as well. And then you have Cash. So your web quest actually focuses on the 5 children, not on Addie and Ance, because the 5 children, their issues and their journeys are more obvious rather than Addie and Ance's. And so this is where you really need to start paying attention and focusing, because you will have to do those assignments. So we'll go ahead and start with the oldest, who is Cash. He is the most composed, you could argue. He thinks logically. He thinks by lists and numbers and order. He's very OCD, you could say, in that way, that he needs things to be a certain way, and he can't rely on his emotions as much as he can as his mind. And we see this in a few of his chapters when he's discussing this casket and how he's building it and why it has to fit a certain kind of measurement here and there. This is just how he processes things that are going on in his life. But on the other hand, you have Darl, who's the second oldest Bungeon child. And he has been known to be seen as the possible narrator because he can see what other people are doing and what's going on in other people's lives, even when it's not his chapter. So he could show up in Cash's chapter, and you can hear him saying something, but it's not his perspective, and he didn't actually see what was going on. It's really interesting, and this is why people believe that Faulkner represented himself through Darl. It's because he was the black sheep of the family, and he could see like a bird's eye view of what was going on with everyone. And this is why everyone wanted to cart him off in the end, because he knew things about all the other people that other people didn't know. It was all secrets. And so he was this all-knowing character, but that scared people. And the way he would come off would seem a little bit dangerous at times. And then you have Jewel. He is the child that is not a Bungeon. We find out that Addie actually had an affair with the minister, and because of that, Jewel was created. And Darl and Addie are the only people that know about Jewel, and who his actual parents are. But we can see throughout the novel that although Jewel may not know it, he feels it, because he's constantly fighting with ants, and he refuses to take anything, even for his horse. He refuses to have ants give him anything. And Jewel stands apart from the rest of the family by owning his horse. Like, everyone else was a little concerned with this horse, but it was Jewel that went out on his own. He had the initiative to do it himself, to get his horse, to feed his horse. He will not take anything from ants. All this stuff seems like he is rebelling against ants because he's not his father. And this is where Jewel is a very interesting character, because his actions show that he may know subconsciously, but he doesn't actually know. And so it will be really interesting to delve into that psychological state with Jewel. Then you have the only daughter, who is Dewey Dell. Dewey Dell is the younger representation of her mother, as we can see in the novel, especially after reading chapter 40, because you can see the comparisons between Addie and Dewey Dell with the expectations of womanhood, the wanting to be able to act on their own desires and do their own thing, but being stuck because they both get pregnant. However, Dewey Dell is trying to find an abortion for most of the novel, but never actually receives one, or so as far as we know, we don't know what happens after the novel. But Dewey Dell is a very important character as well, because of this representation, this hopelessness that she feels, this almost betrayal that she feels too from the man that she slept with, because he just left her and just gave her money to get the abortion. So this is really cool, because you can relate this now to abortion rights nowadays. You can find many videos on the Women's March that happened last year. You can find policies, state versus federal rights for abortion and birth control and all that stuff. So that's going to be really, really cool and, to relate to nowadays. And then you have Varnamen, who is the youngest Bungeon. And he is the one that most people are confused about with his chapters. A lot of people don't realize how young he is, but he is just a child. And so his chapters are more all over the place and don't really make sense. But that's because that's the scattered mind of a child. So it's really hard to put yourself in those shoes, but once you do, you get a general understanding of what's going on. He can't really understand that his mother died, and so he associates her with the dead fish, which, if you think about this a little psychology-wise, you can see that some people could argue that Varnamen is thinking that he killed his mother because he was the one that killed the fish in the beginning. And a lot of kids do think that. They feel guilty when someone dies, that maybe they did something wrong. And so this is a really interesting way for Faulkner to represent that through a metaphor like this. And it's really interesting to look at the figurative language with Varnamen. Okay, so now that you guys have a general overview of the characters and we read the novel, we are going to go ahead and start on that web quest. It is very important to take the time to answer those questions at home right now, and then later on, the next day in class, you're going to get together, you guys are going to finalize your answers, and then you're going to get together and make a presentation to where you can tell us more in depth about the characters. I want you guys to learn from each other, and so you guys are going to be able to get up there and talk about the character and how the character's journey and their thoughts and actions relate to the plot and the theme, and why it's really important to analyze these characters to understand what Faulkner wants us to know about them. So get out there, get on it, guys. I know you guys are going to do great with it. If you guys have any questions, email me, and let's go ahead and get started.